Little Women, Chapter 9. Meg Goes to Vanity Fair. I do think it was the most fortunate thing in the world that those children should have the measles just now, said Meg one April day, as she stood packing the go-abroady trunk in her room, surrounded by her sisters. And so nice of Annie Moffat not to forget her promise. A whole fortnight of fun will be regularly splendid, replied Jo, looking like a windmill as she folded skirts with her long arms. And such lovely weather. I'm so glad of that, added Beth, tidily sorting neck and hair ribbons in her best box, lent for the great occasion. I wish I was going to have a fine time and wear all these nice things, said Amy, with her mouth full of pins as she artistically replenished her sister's cushion. I wish you were all going, but as you can't, I shall keep my adventures to tell you when I come back. I'm sure it's the least I can do. When you've been so kind, lending me things and helping me get ready, said Meg, glancing around the room at the very simple outfit, which seemed nearly perfect in her eyes. What did Mother give you out of the treasure box? Asked Amy, who had not been present at the opening of a certain cedar chest, in which Mrs. March kept a few relics of past splendour, as gifts for her girls when the proper time came. A pair of silk stockings, that pretty carved fan, and a lovely blue sash. I wanted the violet silk, but there isn't any time to make it over, so I must be contented with my old tarlatan. It will look nicely over my new muslin skirt, and the sash will set it off beautifully. I wish I hadn't smashed my coral bracelet, for you might have had it, said Jo, who loved to give and lend, but whose possessions were usually too dilapidated to be of much use. There is a lovely old-fashioned pearl set in the treasure box, but Mother said real flowers were the prettiest ornaments for a young girl, and Laurie promised to send me all I want, replied Meg. Now, let me see. There's my new grey walking suit. Just curl up the feather in my hat, Beth. Then the poplin for Sunday, and the small party. Oh, it looks heavy for spring, doesn't it? The violet silk would be so nice. Oh, dear. Never mind, you've got the tarlatan for the big party, and you always look like an angel in white, said Amy, brooding over the little store of finery in which her soul delighted. It isn't low-necked, and it doesn't sweep enough, but it will have to do. My blue house dress looks so well turned and freshly trimmed that I feel as if I've got a new one. My silk sack isn't a bit the fashion, and my bonnet doesn't look like Sally's. I didn't like to say anything, but I was sadly disappointed in my umbrella. I told Mother black, with a white handle, but she forgot and bought a green one with a yellowish handle. It's strong and neat, so I ought not to complain, but I know I should feel ashamed of it beside Annie's silk one with the gold top, sighed Meg, surveying the little umbrella with great disfavour. Change it, advised Jo. I won't be so silly or hurt Mammy's feelings when she took so much pain to get my things. It's a nonsensical notion of mine, and I'm not going to give up to it. My silk stockings and 2 pairs of new gloves are my comfort. You are a dear to lend me yours, Jo. I feel so rich and sort of elegant with 2 new pairs, and the old ones cleaned up for the common. And Meg took a refreshing peep at her glove box. Annie Moffat has blue and pink bows on her nightcaps. Would you put some on mine? She asked, as Beth brought up a pile of snowy muslins fresh from Hannah's hands. No, I wouldn't, for the smart caps won't match the plain gowns, without any trimming on them. Poor folks shouldn't rig, said Jo decidedly. I wonder if I shall ever be happy enough to have real lace on my clothes and bows on my cap, said Meg impatiently. You said the other day you'd be perfectly happy if you could only go to Annie Moffat's, observed Beth in her quiet way. So I did. Well, I am happy, and I won't fret, but it does seem as if the more one gets, the more one wants, doesn't it? There, now, the trays are ready, and everything in but my ball dress, which I shall leave for Mother to pack, said Meg, cheering up as she glanced from the half-filled trunk to the many times pressed and mended white tarlatan, which she called her ball dress, with an important air. The next day was fine, and Meg departed in style, for a fortnight of novelty and pleasure. Mrs. March had consented to the visit rather than reluctantly, fearing that Margaret would come back more discontented than when she went. But she had begged so hard, and Sally had promised to take good care of her, and a little pleasure seemed so delightful after a winter of irksome work, that the mother yielded, and the daughter went to take her first taste of fashionable life. The Moffats were very fashionable, and simple Meg was rather daunted at first, but the splendour of the house and the elegance of its occupants. But they were kindly people, in spite of the frivolous life they led, and soon put their guest at her ease. Perhaps Meg felt, without understanding why, that they were not particularly cultivated or intelligent people, and that all their gilding could not quite conceal the ordinary matter of which they made. It certainly was agreeable to fare sumptuously, drive in a fine carriage, wear her best frocks every day, and do nothing but enjoy herself. It suited her exactly, and soon she began to imitate the manners and conversations of those about her, to put on airs and graces, use French phrases, crimp her hair, take in her dresses, and talk about the fashions as well as she could. The more she saw of Annie Moffat's pretty things, the more she envied her, and sighed to be rich. Home now looked bare and dismal as she thought of it. Work grew harder than ever, and she felt that she was a very destitute and much injured girl, in spite of the new gloves and silk stockings. She had not much time for repining. However, for the three young girls were busily employed in having a good time. They stopped, walked, rode and called all day, went to theatres and operas, or frolicked at home in the evening, for Annie had many friends, and knew how to entertain them. Her older sisters were very fine young ladies, and one was engaged, which was extremely interesting and romantic, Meg thought. Mr. Moffat was a fat, jolly old gentleman, who knew her father, and Mrs. Moffat, a fat, jolly old lady, who took a great fancy to Meg, as her daughter had done. Everyone petted her, and Daisy, as they called her, was in a fair way to have her head turned. When the evening for the small party came, she found the poplin wouldn't do at all, for all the other girls were putting on thin dresses and making themselves very fine indeed. So out came the Tarlatan, looking older, limper, and shabbier than ever beside Sally's crisp new one. Meg saw the girls glance at it, and then at one another, and her cheeks began to burn, for with all her gentleness she was very proud. No one said a word about it, but Sally offered to dress her hair, and Annie to tie her sash, and Belle, the engaged sister, praised her white arms, but, in their kindness, Meg saw only pity for her poverty, and her heart felt very heavy as she stood by herself, while the others laughed, chattered, and flew about like gauzy butterflies. The hard, bitter feeling was getting pretty bad, when the maid brought in a box of flowers. Before she could speak, Annie had the cover off, and all were exclaiming at the lovely roses, heath and fern within. "It's for Belle, of course. George always sends her stuff, but these are altogether ravishing," cried Annie, with a great sniff. "They're for Miss March," the man said, "and here's a note," put in the maid, holding it to Meg. "What fun! Who are they from? Didn't know you had a lover," cried the girls, fluttering about Meg in a high state of curiosity and surprise. "The note is from Mother, and the flowers from Laurie," said Meg simply, yet much gratified that he had not forgotten her. "Oh, indeed," said Annie, with a funny look, as Meg slipped the note into her pocket as a sort of talisman against envy, vanity, and false pride. For the few loving words had done her good, and the flowers cheered her up by their beauty. Feeling almost happy again, she laid by a new fern and roses for herself, and quickly made up the rest in a dainty bouquet for the breasts, hair, and skirts of her friends, offering them so prettily that Clara, the older sister, told her she was the sweetest little thing she ever saw, and they looked quite charmed with her small attention. Somehow the kind act finished her despondency, and when all the rest went to show themselves to Mrs. Moffat, she saw a happy, bright-eyed face in the mirror, as she laid her ferns against her rippling hair and fastened the roses in the dress that didn't strike her as so very shabby now. She enjoyed herself very much that evening, for she danced to her heart's content. Everyone was very kind, and she had 3 compliments. Annie made her sing, and someone said she had a remarkably fine voice. Major Lincoln asked who the fresh little girl with the beautiful eyes was, and Mr. Moffat insisted on dancing with her because she didn't dawdle, but had some spring in her, as he gracefully expressed it. So altogether she had a very nice time, till she overheard a bit of conversation which disturbed her extremely. She was sitting just inside the conservatory, waiting for her partner to bring her an ice, when she heard a voice ask, on the other side of the flowery wall, "How old is he?" 16 or 17, I should say," replied another voice. "It would be a grand thing for one of those girls, wouldn't it? Sally says they're very intimate now, and the old man quite dotes on them. Mrs. M has made her plans, I dare say, and will play her cards well early as it is. The girl evidently doesn't think of it yet," said Mrs. Moffat. "She told that fib about her mamma as if she didn't know, and coloured up when the flowers came quite prettily. Poor thing, she'd be so nice if she only got up in style." "Do you think she'd be offended if we offered to lend her a dress for Thursday?" asked another voice. "She's proud, but I don't believe she'd mind, for that dowdy tarlatan is all she's got. She may tear it tonight, and that would be a good excuse for offering a decent one. We'll see. I shall ask young Lawrence as a compliment to her, and we'll have fun about it afterward." Here Meg's partner appeared, to find her looking much flushed and rather agitated. She was proud, and her pride was useful just then, for it helped her hide the mortification, anger, and disgust of what she had just heard. For, innocent and unsuspicious as she was, she could not help understanding the gossip of her friends. She tried to forget it, but could not, and kept repeating it to herself. Mrs. M has made her plans, that fib about her mamma, and dowdy tarlatan, till she was ready to cry, and rush home and tell her troubles and ask for advice. As that was impossible, she did her best to seem gay, and being rather excited, she succeeded so well that no one dreamed what an effort she was making. She was very glad when it was all over, and she was quiet in her bed, where she could think and wonder of and fume until her head ached and her hot cheeks were cooled by a few natural tears. Those foolish yet well-meant words had opened a new world to Meg, and much disturbed the peace in the old one, in which till now she had lived as happily as a child. Her innocent friendship with Laurie was spoiled by the silly speeches she had overheard. Her faith in her mother was a little shaken by the worldly plans attributed to her by Mrs. Moffat, who judged others by herself, and the sensible resolution to be contented with a simple wardrobe which suited a poor man's daughter was weakened by the unnecessary pity of the girls who thought a shabby dress one of the greatest calamities under heaven. Poor Meg had a restless night, and got up heavy-eyed, unhappy, half resentful towards her friends, and half ashamed of herself for not speaking out frankly, and setting everything right. Everybody dawdled that morning, and it was noon before the girls found energy enough even to take up their worstest work. Something in the manner of her friends struck Meg at once. They treated her with more respect, she thought, took quite a tender interest in what she said, and looked at her with eyes that plainly betrayed curiosity. All this surprised and flattered her, though she did not understand it until Miss Bell looked up from her writing and said with a sentimental air, "Daisy, dear, I've sent an invitation for your friend Mr. Lawrence for Thursday. We should like to know him, and it's only proper compliment to you." Meg coloured, but a mischievous fancy to tease the girls made her reply demurely, "You are very kind, but I'm afraid he won't come." "Why not, Cherie?" asked Miss Bell. "He's too old." "My child, what do you mean? What is his age? I beg to know," cried Miss Clara. "Nearly 70, I believe," answered Meg, counting stitches to hide the merriment in her eyes. "You sly creature! Of course we meant the young man," exclaimed Miss Bell, laughing. "There isn't any. Laurie is only a little boy," and Meg laughed also, at the queer look which the sisters exchanged as she thus described her supposed lover. "About your age?" Nan said. "No, near my sister's age." "Near my sister Jo's? I am 17 in August," returned Meg, tossing her head. It's very nice of him to send you flowers, isn't it? Said Annie, looking wise about nothing. Yes, he often does to all of us, for their house is full, and we are so fond of them. My mother and old Mr. Lawrence are friends, you know, so it's quite natural that we children should play together. And Meg hoped that they would say no more. It's evident Daisy isn't out yet, said Miss Clara to Belle with a nod. Quite a pastoral state of innocence all around, returned Miss Bell with a shrug. I'm going out to get some little matters for my girls. Can I do anything for you, young ladies? Asked Mrs. Moffat, lumbering in like an elephant in silk and lace. No, thank you, ma'am, replied Sally. I've got my new pink silk for Thursday, and I don't want a thing. Nor I, began Meg, but stopped because it occurred to her that she did want several things and could not have them. What shall you wear? Asked Sally. My old white one again, if I can mend it fit to be seen. It got sadly torn last night, said Meg, trying to speak quite easily but feeling very uncomfortable. Why don't you send home for another? Said Sally, who was not an observing young lady. I haven't got any other. It cost Meg an effort to say that, but Sally did not see it and exclaimed in amiable surprise, Only that? How funny! She did not finish her speech, for Belle shook her head at her and broke in, saying kindly, Not at all. Where is the use in having lots of dresses when she isn't out? There's no need of sending home, Daisy, even if you have a dozen, for I have the sweetest blue silk laid away, which I've outgrown, and you shall wear it to please me, won't you, dear? You are very kind, but I don't mind my old dress. If you don't, it does well enough for a little girl like me, said Meg. Now, do let me please make myself by dressing you up in style. I admire to do it, and you be a regular little beauty, with a touch here and there. I shan't let anyone see you till you're done, and then we'll burst upon them like Cinderella and her godmother going to the ball, said Belle in her persuasive tone. Meg couldn't refuse the offer so kindly made, for a desire to see it. She would be a little beauty after touching up, causing her to accept and forget all of her former uncomfortable feelings towards the Moffats. On the Thursday evening, Belle shut herself up with her maid, and between them they turned Meg into a fine lady. They crimped and curled her hair, they polished her neck and arms with some fragrant powder, touched her lip with coralline salve to make them redder, and Hortense would have added a soupçon of rouge if Meg had not rebelled. They laced her in a sky-blue dress, which was so tight she could hardly breathe, and so low in the neck that the modest Meg blushed in the mirror. A set of silver filigree was added, bracelets, necklace, brooch, and earrings, for Hortense tied them on, and a bit of pink silk, which did not show. A cluster of tea rosebuds at the bosom, and a ruche reconcealed Meg to the display of the prettiest white shoulders, and a pair of high-heeled blue silk boots satisfied the last wish of her heart. A laced handkerchief, a plumy fan, and a bouquet in a silver holder finished her off, and Miss Bell surveyed her with her satisfaction of a little girl with a newly dressed doll. Mademoiselle is charmante, très jolie, is she not? Cried Hortense, clasping her hands in an affected rapture. Come and show yourself, said Miss Bell, leading the way to the rooms where the others were waiting. As Meg went rustling after, with her long skirts trailing, her earrings tingling, her curls waving, and her heart beating, she felt as if her fun had really begun at last, for the mirror had plainly told her that she was a little beauty. Her friends repeated the pleasing phrase enthusiastically, and for several minutes she stood, like a jackdaw in the fable, enjoying her borrowed plumes, while the rest chattered like a party of magpies. While I dress, do you drill her, Nan, in the management of her skirt and those French heels, or she will trip herself up. Take the silver butterfly and catch up that long curl on the left side of your head, Clara, And don't any of you disturb the charming work of my hands, said Belle, as she hurried away, looking well pleased with her success. I'm afraid to go down. I feel so queer and stiff and half-dressed, said Meg to Sally, as the bell rang, and Mrs. Moffat sent to ask the young ladies to appear at once. You don't look a bit like yourself, but you are very nice. I'm nowhere beside you, for Belle has heaps of taste, and you're quite French, I assure you. Let your flowers hang. Don't be so careful with them. And be sure you don't trip, returned Sally, trying not to care that Meg was prettier than herself. Keeping that warning carefully in mind, Margaret got safely down the stairs and sailed into the drawing-room, where the Moffats and a few early guests were assembled. She very soon discovered that there is charm about fine clothes, which attracts a certain class of people and secures their respect. Several young ladies, who had taken no notice of her before, were very affectionate all of a sudden. Several young gentlemen, who had only stared at her at the other party, now not only stared, but asked to be introduced, and said all manner of foolish but agreeable things to her. And several old ladies, who sat on the sofa and criticised the rest of the party, inquired who she was, with an air of interest. She heard Mrs. Moffat reply to one of them, Daisy March, father a colonel in the army, one of our first families, but reverses of fortune, you know. Intimate friends with the Lawrences. Sweet creature, I assure you. My Ned is quite wild about her. Dear me, said the old lady, putting up her glass for another observation of Meg, who tried to look as if she'd not heard, and been rather shocked at Miss Moffat's fibs. The queer feeling did not pass away, but she imagined herself acting the part of a fine lady, so got on pretty well. Though the tight dress gave her a side ache, the train kept getting under her feet, and she was in constant fear lest her earring ring should fly off or get lost or broken. She was flirting her fan and laughing at the feeble jokes of the young gentleman who tried to be witty, when she saw someone stop laughing and look confused. For just opposite she saw Laurie. He was staring at her with undisguised surprise and disapproval also, she thought. For though he bowed and smiled, yet something in his honest eyes made her blush and wish she had her old dress on. To complete her confusion, she saw Belle nudge Annie, and both glanced from her to Laurie, who she was happy to see, looking unusually boyish and shy. Silly creatures to put such thoughts into my head. I won't care for it, or let it change me a bit, thought Meg, and rustled across the room to shake hands with her friend. I'm glad you came. I was afraid you wouldn't, she said, with her most grown-up air. Joe wanted me to come and tell her how you looked, so I did, answered Laurie, without turning his eyes upon her, though he half smiled at her maternal tone. What shall you tell her? Asked Meg, full of curiosities to know his opinion of her, yet feeling ill at ease with him for the first time. I shall say I didn't know you, for you look so grown up and unlike yourself, I'm quite afraid of you, he said, fumbling at his glove button. How absurd of you! The girls dress me up for fun, and I rather like it. Wouldn't Jo stare if she saw me? Said Meg, bent on making him say whether he thought her improved or not. Yes, I think she would, replied Laurie gravely. Don't you like me so? Asked Meg. No, I don't, was the blunt reply. Why not? In an anxious tone. He glanced at her frizzled head, bare shoulders, and fantastically trimmed dress with an expression that abashed her more than his answer, which had not a particle of his usual politeness about it. I don't like fuss and feathers. It was altogether too much from a lad younger than herself, and Meg walked away, saying perpetually, You are the rudest boy I ever saw. Feeling very much ruffled, she went and stood at the quiet window to cool her cheeks, for the tight dress gave her an uncomfortably brilliant colour. As she stood there, Major Lincoln passed by, and a minute after she heard him saying to his mother, They're making a fool of that little girl. I wanted you to see her, but they have spoiled her entirely. She's nothing but a doll tonight. Oh dear, sighed Meg. I wish I'd been sensible and worn my own things, and I should not have disgusted other people, or felt so uncomfortable and ashamed of myself. She leaned her forward on the cool pane, and stood, half hidden by the curtains, never minding that her favourite waltz had begun, till someone touched her, and turning, she saw Laurie, looking penitent, as he said, with his very best bow, his hands out. Please forgive my rudeness and come and dance with me." "I'm afraid it'll be too disagreeable with you," said Meg, trying to look offended and failing entirely.